Bobby Lashley. To an older generation, he's known as a dominator. However, to the newer generation, he's most likely seen as an absolute joke. Lashley started out in WWE in 2005 and had a really promising debut where he destroyed Sami Zayn. Immediately, he was established as a real deal and an up-and-comer in the main event scene. Into 2007, that was when he really set off. I'm not going to sit here and act like his whole time he was on top, but he never looked weak. That was the main thing about Lashley. He never looked weak. A perfect example of this was the months leading into WrestleMania 23, where he was ECW champion. He was on top. He was having a feud with Vince McMahon, which involved Donald Trump, and overall it just done wonders for Lashley. Sure, he'd won the US title, but this is what really had him at the top of his game. The feud with Vince McMahon didn't end though at this point, as it continued after WrestleMania with Umaga. And you can say whatever you want about this feud, but it sure was evident that Vince had some big plans for Bobby Lashley. However, Bobby Lashley would leave in the coming months. And to be honest with you, I think he left before he truly peaked. He had a great match with John Cena at the Great American Bash 2007 for the WWE title. And even though he did not win the match, I still believe that Lashley looked really good. I honestly believe that if Lashley hadn't left around this time, he would have been up there with the likes of Edge, John Cena, Undertaker, Randy Orton, Batista as one of the main guys. But whatever. Lashley returned in 2018, and I'm just going to say right now, it was nothing like what any of us expected. Now, the moment he returned, that one moment, was really good and I had high hopes. They were just putting him in random tag team matches that did nothing for him. It was just so generic. I was expecting so much, but everything after that was just so dead. Just dead. This whole thing with Sami Zayn and him loving his sisters, what the absolute fuck was all that? That literally sucked any life out of a possible Lashley versus Lesnar match. It was just so bad. But you know what, look, I was just going to base it off the fact that maybe the momentum just wasn't there. Maybe they were going to start building him up. Then he started feuding with Roman Reigns, and you know what? At this point I was like, okay, maybe they're going to pull the trigger on him. Maybe it was just a bad start, it was just bad booking, but they were going to redeem themselves. And for a short period of time, they were actually starting to redeem themselves. The whole story behind this rivalry was who was going to face Brock Lesnar, who would be the better man, and who would slay the beast at SummerSlam. And I thought, you know what, they realised that Roman just isn't going to do it. Lashley's hot off the return. Well, not really hot off the return because they messed it up. But look, this is our chance to get Lashley versus Brock, a dream match that everyone wanted. And he won Extreme Rules, and I was like, yes, they're going to listen to the fans. Lashley's going to SummerSlam, and he's going to beat Brock Lesnar, right? That's what we all thought, right? Wrong. Despite winning the match at Extreme Rules, in which everyone thought was technically a number one contenders match, it wasn't an official label, but it was built up like a number one contenders match. But for some reason, they decided that they wanted to go back on everything they'd done at the pay-per-view and had this random tournament on Raw where the winner would face Brock at SummerSlam. And they dropped the ball on Lashley so fucking hard. And Roman versus Brock for the fucking 1000th time. And Lashley is basically done. By this point, all the hype was pretty much dead, and Lashley was just taking a backseat to Roman versus Brock. And to be honest with you, he was just floating around in the mid-card doing absolutely nothing. And to be honest, I don't blame people for having zero interest, because it's obvious the people that were booking him didn't have any fucking interest either. Honestly though, pairing him up with Lio Rush was a good decision, and they could have made absolute money with this. They could have built him up as an absolute destroyer with Lio Rush as a legit mouthpiece. And honestly, it started out promising. I mean, he was dominating guys like Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, and he was looking good. But then, of course, Crown Jewel came, best in the world tournament. He lost to Seth Rollins. Just bam. Yeah, he dominated beforehand, but one stomp and he was just knocked straight back into just this area of just inconsistent booking, where he's built up to be strong, but then when push comes to shove, he needs help. Or in other cases, he just flat out looks like a complete joke and just loses these stupid matches. Look, I'm a fan of Elias, I really am, but he's the type of wrestler that can lose to some more dominant guys on certain occasions and still come out the other end alright, because he's more of a comedy act than someone who's meant to be this big dominator and taken seriously. Like, when Lashley's whole gimmick is about being a dominator, but he does the opposite of dominate, it doesn't fucking work. This whole pairing with Lio Rush could have reinvigorated Lashley as a character and a wrestler and made people take him seriously again, but it did the opposite. This guy was out here slapping his ass. How is that good? Honestly, this whole feud with Elias was absolutely terrible. Did absolutely nothing for Elias. Did even less for Bobby Lashley. And honestly, Lashley and Lio Rush looked like absolute clowns. They were beat up. They were destroyed by one person. 2-on-1, they still couldn't do it. Any dominance or mystique behind Lashley was completely thrown out the window. And honestly, it was just all around awful. I'm sorry, it was terrible. It was that bad. And what really confused me was, after being made look like an absolute jobber, he entered into a very short-lived rivalry with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins, like the biggest star on Raw, and I was like, I'm confused, but you know what, I'll go away. We'll see where it goes. So yeah, after crashing a match between Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins, he was put in a triple threat match for the Intercontinental title, in which Dean Ambrose was currently holding. And he actually won it! Lashley has actually done something since returning. Yeah, Lio Rush helped him, but you know what, it doesn't matter, just leave all that aside. Lashley has actually gotten a prominent win that opens up the doors for, well, a good title reign that can elevate him, you know? But no, he was eliminated from the Royal Rumble in 13 seconds and was put in a feud with Finn Balor, which saw him lose and quickly regain the IC title, only to lose it at WrestleMania to the Demon. Honestly, this whole reign was just really forgettable. And after this, the whole pairing of Lio Rush and Bobby Lashley completely fizzled out. Lio Rush went on a hiatus due to backstage conflict, allegedly, and when he returned, he went straight back to NXT. I feel like them as a pairing was completely wasted, and it never really got an official conclusion, despite hinting many times they were going to break up. It was all just really underwhelming, and I wish we could have got a conclusion, but we didn't. Lashley was then put in a feud with Braun Strowman, and honestly, it was enjoyable for what it was, and Lashley was able to show that he still had that demeanour within him. But all in all, we all knew that Strowman was just gonna go over him, and he did. Like, yeah, Lashley was punked out and clearly overpowered by Strowman, but I think it was one of the best things he was able to do since returning. The reason why I say this was decent was because although Lashley lost a last man standing match and a singles match, I just think he was able to kind of show his potential in those matches better than any other match before this, and it proved that he had so much potential to be a monster dominant heel, but they just didn't utilise him. After a hiatus, Lashley returned with Lana as a couple, and at this point it's clear that showing Lashley's dominance isn't on their highest of priorities right now. Really, this whole angle is just take it or leave it. Honestly, I see it as a so bad it's kinda entertaining situation, and hey, look, at least he's on TV. Let's be real though, the Dominator Lashley is just something which they don't care about anymore. We can either complain or embrace it, and let's be honest, they don't give a fuck about what people like me are saying. Look, all in all, Lashley's whole return this past year has just been one big mess. They have had no clear intentions or path in which they want to take him, and the whole Lashley versus Lesnar dream match is pretty much dead at this point. I mean, it doesn't look like they're ever going to book it, and to be honest, we should just forget about it, if you ask me. A lot of Lashley's credibility and ability to be taken seriously is gone, and to be honest with you, they missed out on their perfect opportune moment, SummerSlam 2018. No way is this Lashley's fault. I mean, honestly, it's just the people who book, the creative, all that sort of stuff. I am a big fan of Bobby Lashley, and I hope he gets a good, deserving main event push in the future. He has had a great career, but there is no denying that his second run in WWE thus far could have been booked way better.